20,000 pounds of truck and cargo, and only 170 pounds of GI driver to bring the thing to a stop. But it can be done on good roads at high speed, or on rough going, where the driver's teeth are jolted out of his jaws. No matter how heavy the load or how tired the driver, this little brake unit can transform a slight push on the brake pedal into a big grip on the brake drums. Let's get the general picture first. This Hydrovac system uses vacuum created in the intake manifold to multiply braking pressure from pedal to wheels, and to maintain this vacuum so the brakes will work in an emergency even when the engine is stopped. This check valve is placed in the manifold line. Here's how it works. Let's suppose this truck has been standing long enough since the engine was shut down to have air at normal pressure present in the entire system, having leaked into the manifold and slowly past the check valve. The check valve will rest by gravity on its seat. Now, we start the engine. Air is sucked out of the manifold, lowering the pressure above the valve. Finally, the trapped air below the valve lifts the valve from its seat against the reduced pressure in the manifold side. Now, manifold suction drains the air from the entire system, and the brakes are ready to function. The check valve drops down on its seat again, since there's no air pressure below it. When we stop the engine, vacuum in the manifold is no longer produced. Air rushes in and forces the check valve tight on the seat, trapping the vacuum in the system. Hydrovac brakes and another type called vacuum power brakes both utilize this check valve on the intake manifold line. But Hydrovac differs from the vacuum power system in two major respects. Hydrovac uses brake fluid instead of mechanical linkage to transmit pressure from the brake pedal to the control valve. And the power cylinder boosts pressure in the brake lines by means of a slave cylinder instead of the master cylinder in the vacuum power system. Now let's get a clear idea of how that power cylinder works. When the brakes are applied, air rushes through the atmospheric valve and into the power cylinder. Notice the air cleaner. Part of the air has pushed against the first piston, and part of it, going through the center shaft, has acted on the second piston. This simple arrangement gives us double the working area for air pressure without increasing the overall diameter of the entire Hydrovac unit. Now for the control valve. In this system, the brake pedal is connected directly to the master cylinder. When the pedal is pushed down, the pressure of the foot moves the brake fluid forward and starts to expand the brake shoes. But as the pressure in the brake lines rises just above the pressure of the return spring in the control valve, it pushes this piston ahead. That motion, acting through the toggle, closes the vacuum valve and opens the atmospheric valve. Let's examine that toggle more closely. This is a cutaway of the Hydrovac valve. This push rod represents the piston that moves under hydraulic pressure from the brake pedal and master cylinder. The rounded end of the piston bears against this short shaft, to which are attached these triangular-shaped toggles, one on each side of the shaft. Now, better than words can do it, just watch the action of this simple but effective device. Notice that this valve spring aids in returning the atmospheric valve to its seat, in which position the atmospheric valve is sort of an anchor for the toggle action, causing further movement to pull down on the vacuum valve and open it. And in the reverse movement, the closing of the vacuum valve comes first, and once closed, the toggle cannot move further in that direction. So now must move against the valve spring pressure here and open the atmospheric valve. Now suppose we look at this valve action with the airflow indicated in black. Pressure on the brake pedal compresses this spring as the piston bears against the shaft, first closing the vacuum valve, shutting off suction from the intake manifold. Next, the atmospheric valve opens, air rushes in coming from the air cleaner, and goes into the power cylinder, forcing the two pistons toward the slave cylinder. This forward movement closes this check valve in the slave cylinder, traps the brake fluid in the brake lines proper, and multiplies the pressure on the brake shoes. The hydraulic fluid pressure is also working on the slave cylinder piston. At the same time, the air behind the power cylinder pistons pushes against this diaphragm in the control valve. That will force the diaphragm back. The toggle will pivot on the vacuum valve, and this spring on the atmospheric valve stem now forces the atmospheric valve closed. This same force flows back to the brake pedal and gives the driver the feel of how much pressure he's applying. If he needs more pressure to stop his vehicle, he presses harder on the brake pedal. This opens the atmospheric valve again, and the action you've just seen repeats itself. Now for the release cycle. When the brake pedal is released, pressure on the brake fluid drops, and the spring in the control valve pushes the piston to the rear and moves the toggle into the brake's off position, closing the atmospheric valve and opening the vacuum valve. And with the vacuum valve open, the intake manifold quickly exhausts the air from the system. The power cylinder pistons return to the released position, withdrawing the piston in the slave cylinder and removing the hydraulic pressure in the brake line. And that's how Hydrovac works. Know your trucks. Know how they work. We've got to take a lot of men and a lot of stuff to a lot of places. So keep them rolling.